What's going on, guys? Back here at the King of the Course podcast, we got a new guest this week, Mr. Craig Dixon. He is the owner of Circles Golf, and he's going to be kind of going through this new software that's kind of taken over the golf industry and how it kind of works. So how's it going, Craig?
Harrison, so good to see you. Yeah, really well.
Yes, sir. So we'll just jump right into it. Kind of tell me a little bit about yourself and what Circles Golf is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's probably best to give you a little bit of background. My name's Craig Dixon, CEO and founder of Circles. I've got the best job in the world, Harrison. It's so good. My job is essentially to go and look at how players are performing on the golf course to help optimize their training in order to peak for events. So essentially what we're doing, because golf's just hard, right? It's just a difficult sport. And what we're essentially doing is we're looking at ways in which we can help players achieve their goals in the least amount of time and effort. And I think it's this epic time within golf where to get a competitive edge, the best way to get that edge is using your time in the most efficient way. And that's really the problem we're solving.
I agree.
If you looked at 40 years ago, mate, if you wanted to get a competitive edge, coach would just send you into the gym. And people are like, what on earth is Harrison doing? Like, what's going on? Then it kind of moved into like sports psychology, equipment, Doppler radar. Now, as a high-performing athlete, if you're doing all of those things, there's no competitive edge because everyone's doing it. So now it's a matter of when you spend any minute or any bit of energy within your game to train or improve, is it done in the right area? Is it done with focus? Is it done with intent? Is it done in the area that's going to help you bridge a performance gap? And so you're just using your time in the most efficient way possible, but also more importantly, how are you then resourcing your team with the information they need to help you become successful? And so with Circles, the reason why we're called Circles is the actual website is drawmorecircles.com. So when you make a birdie on the scorecard, you draw a circle around the number.
Circle around it,
Essentially, we want to help people make more birdies. But we never actually intended to build software. That was never our intent. Kind of pre-COVID, I was the high-performance and big data specialist for like the Chinese Olympic golf teams, work with PGA Tour players, LPGA. We now work with some live golf players too, which is always quite exciting. But essentially what we would do is we would go into these organizations and we would work with them to help give them that kind of competitive edge, help optimize their performance, right? And we were traveling all the time. I was out of the country for like 258 days of the year. We were constantly traveling. And then once COVID hit, we thought, well, what would happen if we provided this high performance service and made it available to the elite player?
Right.
And I need to call out, mate, I'm the dumbest person on our team. We have some very smart people that kind of sit behind this. And I think what we're really doing here is we wanted to afford any player that wants to achieve their best with the information they need to become successful. And when we're talking elite, we're not just talking about tour players. We're talking about any player that truly wants to become the best version of themselves. And so when we're looking at that, what we found, regardless if you're an aspiring tour player or whether you're a player that's wanting to go to college or whether you're a world top 30 player that wants to become world number one, to optimize that performance, we kind of need, in our view, kind of 4 key steps. Right? The first is we really need to get a baseline understanding of your current level of performance. Right? So that's the first thing that we need to do. And that's the bit that I think a lot of players generally don't like doing. That's the bit where players need to collect their on-course shot data.
Right.
We've made that as easy as possible because remember, we were initially designed for Olympic athletes. They hate taking stats with a passion. Right? So they hate doing it so much they give it to their caddies to do. The caddies hate doing it even more than the players. So we had to first of all solve what's the least amount of information we need to drive the maximum amount of insight. So for us, it was really important that we made the data ingestion, under 5 minutes. Then from there, we now have geolocation, which is an exciting tool. But really, what we're trying to figure out there is we're just trying to get a baseline understanding of someone's current level of performance. And once we know that, it's looking at, okay, what does success look like for that player?
Right.
Do they want to turn pro? Do they want to be a tour winner? Do they want to be 90th percentile within the NCAA? Everyone's different, right?
Mhm.
Tour ready, whatever it might be. Then from there, what we can do is once we know where they're starting from and what they're aiming for, we can see, is there a gap and how big is that gap? Then what we do is we run AI and machine learning to start figuring out how do we bridge that performance gap in the most optimal way possible.
Interesting.
Because everyone's different and we're always remodeling. So we're looking for the low-hanging fruit. So it's not about, let's say you're a world top 35 player and you want to win, you want to get to world number 1, or you want to win more events.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily getting every aspect to tour winner. It's a matter of, are there any areas where you may be underperforming to tour average? And how do we get those up? So where's that low-hanging fruit? And then how do we lean into the areas of strength for the player?
Interesting.
Then from there, what we do is once we know where someone is, what they're aiming for, where there's some areas of opportunity, what we work very hard to do is resource every single member of the team with the information they need to help drive success. What is the plan in there?
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the coolest things that we do is we produce bespoke practice goals, right? So generally, if a player is going to go and practice, what do you go and practice? And how do you quantify it? You know, if I asked you after you've been to the range, hey, Harrison, how was practice today? You'd be like, it was good, or it was bad, right? It's very subjective. It doesn't really help your coaching team. So now, and some of the best players that we work with, you know, we've taken players. She was just over 900th in the world when we started working with her. She's now number 2. She got to world number 1, and that was in like 18 months.
Exactly.
And a lot of that is, you know, yes, she's doing all the heavy lifting, but there's opportunities where when a player's training, are they training in the right areas? And what we'd be suggesting that a player does is our system automatically starts identifying, hey, look, if you're going to go and invest some time into practice, these would be the areas we'd suggest you go and look at. And then from there, the goals that we're setting are about 10% harder than what the player is currently performing on the golf course. So you've got very clear areas of focus with achievable goals. But what this does is puts you in a position where you can assess whether, again, golf's hard. You can assess whether, is it an underlying skill? Is there a discrepancy of how you're performing on the golf course? Right now, between how you're intending to perform now, is it a skill thing? Is it an execution thing? What are the variables that kind of go into that? But I think what a lot of players don't do is they don't assess the underlying skill there, because again, you could be playing in tough weather conditions.
Right.
The on-course performance might not be a fair representation of your performance or your underlying skill. So if you can assess it in practice, what it does is it starts identifying, okay, do you need to develop an improved skill, or is there an executional improvement that could be made, whether it's pre-run routine, whether it's pre-shot routine, whatever those things are. But then your coaching team is resourced with that information to have a really engaging conversation with you. And mate, the results are awesome.
Right.
The results are nuts. And I think the true benefit is the fact that you align expectation around what success looks like. But more importantly, after every single practice session, you've got this, you're consistently being beaten over the head with how good you are. Right. So if you turn up and you're like, I'm going to go and practice 7 activities today, you turn up. The way we modify it is that you turn up, you do a 5-ball test. If it's passed, you move on. Passed, you move on, so on and so forth. If there's a failed test, you might block practice for 30 minutes. And then your coaching team is automatically notified, right? But at the end of the practice session, instead of going, was it good or bad? You're now able to go, hey, I practiced 7 activities today. 6 were above, 1 was below. This is what I'm working on. I'm going to come back tomorrow though.
Right. That's
and you go back home and you're like, today was so productive. And when you're continuously seeing like progress through your training, in our view, that creates self-esteem. It creates self-awareness.
Right.
Starts aligning expectation. You go and play, and instead of thinking you have to hit it 3 feet all the time, you can now start looking at what does success really look like.
Right. Confidence. It helps a lot.
Absolutely.
It helps a lot. So just to clarify, so you guys do a lot with strokes gained, and some of the viewers might not know what that word means. So just kind of clarify with everyone, what is strokes gained?
Yeah, absolutely. So strokes gained was a system that was developed by Mark Brody, a Columbia professor, incredible guy, and what he's done to game of golf is amazing. And I think what this does, this allows you, so it's essentially progress to the hole measured in strokes. All right. So historically, players would use like green and regulation. They will use scrambling to start looking at what their performance is. Now, if you look at green and regulation, green and regulation is made up of a multitude of factors, right? So green and regulation is made up of off the tee, it's made up of approaches. Scrambling is made up of approaches and your putting performance. So using those statistics, you weren't really able to look at the underlying issues that are influencing the area, or if it was going well, what was causing it to go well.
Right.
So from a strokes gain perspective, you're able to essentially look at every single individual shot and get a plus or minus, good or bad, relative to a specific cohort that you're addressing it to. So the best way to look at it is, let's say you're playing a par 5 and it's 500 yards long. Instead of thinking it's a par 5 and it's 500 yards long, think of it as a par 5 and it's in 5 shots.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're playing against, let's pretend you're playing against Pro Ready benchmark and their average on that hole is a 5. If you got a 4, right, you've gained 1 stroke. If you got a 6, you've lost 1 stroke, so it's -1.
Right.
And you can essentially take that concept and you can break it down we break it down into 4 categories: off the tee, approaches, short game, and putting. Then you can break it down even further, and then you can break it down to a point where you can get a plus or minus per shot.
Right.
So it really allows you to kind of pinpoint exactly what's going on. I think with the strokes gain values, it becomes such an important part of being aware of what does success look like. I do think, though, that the key thing is that once you've assessed what success looks like, it's not necessarily always looking at a strokes gain value, right? Because you could be on a negative strokes gain number for a long time, and it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
What we're then looking at is, are you getting better? Are you developing as a player over a period of time? So we use a lot of trends in our analysis. So we're really looking at, are you getting better?
Right.
Want to do. And as you can start identifying that you are getting better, that leads in, again, confidence, self-awareness. We do have what's called prediction modeling as well. So we can actually start forecasting what the future looks like based off your last kind of 20 odd rounds. So that becomes a really interesting tool where you can start looking at, okay, are we comfortable what the next 3 months potentially looks like? If you're not, okay, cool. What actions could be done today to influence tomorrow? Right. If you're comfortable with it, awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. But what that does, that helps start having a conversation around, how do you create an environment which is conducive to success? Because I truly believe that most of the time, it's how do you set yourself up? So what does success look like? How do you then focus on that for a consistent long period of time? How do you set up your environment to be conducive to enabling you to achieve those goals? And then more importantly, how do you resource your team with the information to help you be successful so they can hold you accountable on a daily basis to do the things you said you're going to do in order to achieve your goals? Exactly. So it's this awesome environment that you're creating by using data, because it allows you to have an objective conversation versus subjective.
Exactly. That's awesome. Yeah. So what's kind of your background in golf? Did you play? Were you coaching? Like what did you kind of do to get started in this?
I'm a bit weird. I have always wanted to coach since I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
It's my passion.
Right. That's awesome.
And I think, so I turned pro when I was 17.
Okay.
Coaching. I was very, very fortunate. We started working with a lot of really good young players. Lydia Coe kind of came to our academy. We kind of worked with her from the age of 6 to 16, and that really afforded us. We're based in New Zealand. Actually, now most of our team is US based, but I'm still here. The thing with being in New Zealand, I think that does something that's pretty unique. It forces everybody to look at, how do you support players remotely, right? Because in my view, to be the best version you can be, if you really want to be successful at the game, you can't do it from New Zealand. You need to be in the US.
Right.
And so for us, we were getting these players and developing them to a point where they were then moving off overseas to go and train. Conversely, because of the success we got with these juniors kind of coming through, we'd have a lot of players coming internationally to come and train at our facilities. And what we found was we couldn't remotely support them as they'd left the country. And so that was really our kind of first step is really taking an inward approach and saying, how can we better support these individuals? How can we best support them so when they are away that they have the information they need in order to be successful?
Right, that makes
And
a lot of
that's where
sense.
we started working into it. That then afforded me the opportunity to become the high performance and big data specialist for the Olympic teams. And then from there, we started moving into productizing it to give every player, if they're keen and they're passionate about becoming the best versions of themselves, they can essentially get everything they need to think and train like a pro.
Right. That's
even
awesome.
when they're not. So, and we have one rule, mate. So anyone that works with us, they just have to remember 3 words: contact me anytime.
That's good.
So that's the rule. And so we have a wonderful team that are passionate about helping people achieve their best game. And you've got intuitive, high quality software that helps and support them to do that.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you spoke on a couple of players that use it, but who are some of the bigger name players that have used it, and how have you really seen it impact their game?
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we use one example for this? So we work with multiple players across PGA Tour, LPGA. We've got now just over 60 NCAA teams as well using the software. But I think if we use, I don't know, have you heard of a player called Ronan Yin?
I have not.
So she's number 2 in the world right now. It's actually a really interesting story. So because of what we did with Lydia, right, where we worked with Lydia Ko, she got to world number 1 as an amateur. She did some pretty cool stuff. We did a very cool project with the New Zealand government, right? So we went. It was called the Search for the Next World Number 1.
Right, that's awesome.
It was epic. So we go to China. We saw thousands of kids, right? All of these players. We looked at a couple of thousand players. We basically analyzed them, did interviews with each player, and we were able to select 2 players to come to New Zealand for training.
Right.
One of them was Ronan Yin. Right?
Okay.
So she came in. She went back to China. She turned pro. She's in the Guinness Book of World Records. She won, I think, her first 3 pro events.
Oh, wow.
She's then like, hey, I want to go to LPGAQ school. So we're like, okay, cool. So that's really where she started to use circles to really be able to make really informed decisions about her game, right? Because a lot of the time, like, she is such a special person. She's so committed to her game. She's focused. She's unbelievable. But what we then did is we were able to look at that to then start pinpointing the kind of pressure points that she could push. Like, what's that 2% thing you can work on that will create a 5% improvement in score? Right? That's the type of thing we're looking for.
Right.
She did fantastic. She came second at Q school. She then got to a point where she got a full tour card. And with that full tour card, what essentially happened was she was then in a position where she went back to China. She's like, how do I create a team around me? And so what we're able to look at is we're able to look at her historical performance using the data and then actually select or identify. We identified the top kind of 3 coaches that we thought would be appropriate for her, that would be able to help her achieve the things that she needs to do in order to achieve her goals. And then we were able to shortlist them. We were able to get her interviews, and then she was able to select the appropriate team member. So she was actually using data to identify appropriate team members to help her achieve specific things, all data related. And it created such a framework that gone are the days where you're just using subjectivity, because everyone has an opinion, like everyone.
Right.
And no one's opinion's wrong.
Right.
Because they're just opinions. And so what we're able to do is have really meaningful team collaborative conversations, because everything is based off objectivity. Now, what she was then able to do is then use that data to then ensure that when she goes and trains, she's at the end of every tournament, she gets what we'd call a discussion document. So she gets a full analysis over how she's performed, like not just areas of opportunity, but areas of strength. Then from there, there's clear actions that the team can take to then address those areas of opportunity. And you're creating this beautiful feedback loop where she's logging practice, she's being hyper focused on the areas that matter. And what we found is that her world ranking just escalated.
Really,
Again,
that's awesome. Yeah,
a couple of months ago, or even a month ago, I think she got to world number 1 for a few weeks. She's now at number 2, and
that's
we've got
awesome.
the intent there to get back to world number 1. It's
Yeah,
just a beautiful story, but it's amazing where you just have to do the simple stuff right.
right,
Because golf, in my view, is such an emotional game. Like, it's so hard.
right,
And how do you make informed, logical decisions? How do you create an environment which is conducive to helping you be successful? And then how do you resource the team to help you be, have the right infrastructure, have the right
exactly.
support, accountability? How do you do that? And it's being consistent with those activities. And that's one of the best ways in which we've seen someone integrate circles into their performance.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So, what are some of the plans coming up for circles? Any new stuff that you guys are planning or anything?
Mate, so much stuff. The cool thing with it is that it's looking at, we're a little bit different in market where it takes us so long to integrate any new features. And I'll tell you why. So we've got a philosophy where we don't integrate anything unless we can validate that it improves a player's score, right? Or increases compliance. So how do we make it so easy for you to input the information that it's enjoyable, right?
Exactly.
So if you increase performance but it decreases compliance, there's a big question mark around it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
If it increases compliance but doesn't help a player perform, then we don't do it. So there's this balance here. So what we do is we work so hard. So we've got an R&D section of our company. So we're always developing. We're always looking at new ways, new insights. And our community is so fantastic. We're so fortunate to work with good people that help us identify where there's opportunities. What do we need to do to help them achieve better scores? It's very simple. We've got a very cool strokes remaining feature, which we're really excited about. It actually has just come out. So essentially what you can do is you can basically geolocate where you are on the golf course. Again, data entry becomes easy. It has a built-in rangefinder as well. So you can use it for strategy. You can use it for post-round ingestion, and you can use it for during in-round ingestion as well.
That's
but
awesome.
what it will do is it will essentially give you a strokes remaining value. So let's say you've hit it, I don't know, you're going out playing by yourself, right? You're on the golf course and you've hit it slightly right into the rough. You've got 154 to the flag. It'll give you a strokes remaining value. So how many strokes it would take a tour player to get into the hole from that distance. So you can have these mini games against a tour pro when you're by yourself.
Right.
And so you can create this self-awareness. You can have scratch as well. You can put yourself against. You're such a good player, so just going to tour average. But there's ways in which we can integrate and use data that doesn't become boring.
Right.
Right. And I think that's where, if you hear people talk about stats, everyone's eyes glaze over. Like, I don't want to do it. And I think that's because historically, the way it's been used is people are just given numbers, right? And numbers, yes, they're important because it gives you a baseline, but it's around what do we do with that? And that's the big piece we're working to solve. So what are the areas to focus on? So we use the AI machine learning, then we build it into automated practice logs, right? And so now all of a sudden you're going, okay, well, now I've taken my on-course performance and now I know what I need to go and work on. And it's relative to me achieving my goals and based off my on-course performance.
Right.
Then from there, you're able to push a button and it builds out a core strategy for you. Now, the core strategy, in our view, there are so many different ways to play a golf course. So our strategy is not based, it's not prescriptive. We're not saying players need to do this. What it's designed to do, it's actually designed to be printed out or used a couple of weeks out from an event, right? Because it would give you, these are the impact that certain lines could have off score. And then from there, if you did take a specific line, what would the impact on score be? And then from there, how many strokes would that then mean that you'd be taking in particular areas? So then when you go and start formulating the practice session, you can now practice for that event.
Interesting.
And then what it means is that you're able to then play that golf course repetitively on the range prior to you even going to the event. So by the time you turn up, then you're really integrating a core strategy, because core
Right.
strategy has so many variables, like whether how you've previously performed, but also how you're performing on that given week as well.
Right.
And I think from a strategy perspective, it's more informing you as the player to be able to make really informed decisions in a timely fashion. That's the true benefit of preparing appropriately. And that's what
Right.
our strategy is designed for. So essentially, we've created an environment where you put 5 minutes of time
Mhm.
into logging around.
Yeah.
And from there, you get insights that are based off you being able to help achieve your goals. Then you get personalized practice logs. Then you get personalized strategies as well for 5 minutes of work.
That's
And
awesome.
the
Super
whole
easy.
team is resourced with that information,
Exactly.
saving time, effort, and energy.
Exactly. That's awesome. Yeah, it's super easy, and I can say I've used it, and it's super easy to use and very efficient. Our whole team uses it, and I've been able to tell a big difference. We all, after the round, everyone's putting their scorecards in and talking about their strokes gained and everything. So we really
Awesome.
enjoy it. We appreciate the help.
Mate, you guys are absolutely fantastic. And it's a privilege to work with good people and good players as well. So
Yes,
we're
sir.
here to help. So no, it's fantastic. It's our passion.
Yes, sir. Well, it was good talking to you, and I'm
Pleasure.
sure we'll talk soon. And can't wait to see what Circles has in store.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks for your
Yes, sir.
time.
Take care.
See you, mate.